My name's Geraldine Bell, by the way, so I'm the International Business Development Manager. But before we get started, we are recording this session. So if any of you have to leave early, please don't worry. And if you've got any questions at all, just pop them in the chat box down in the bottom right-hand corner. So hopefully you can all see that. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to say today because can't say good morning or good afternoon because I know you've all sort of tuned in from various parts of the world. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by our Head of Education today, Julia Clouter. She's probably been with Scanning Pens as long as I have, so a few years now, Julia, isn't it? And probably worked in education for as long as I have. So I've been working in EdTech probably just over 25 years on the business development side. Well, Julia's very much been on the teaching side. She's been a Senko. She's worked in leadership right across primary, secondary, and even worked in pupil referral units, haven't you, Julia, as well? So she's got a wealth of experience. So I really do hope you're going to enjoy this session today, which is talking about assessment preparation at home and at school. So we're probably going to take maybe an hour of your time. 45 minutes will be myself and Julia presenting. And just to go through the agenda with you, I'll tell you about us as an organisation. I know some of you looking at the list of delegates may already have our pens. Some of you may be thinking about it. So I'll give you a very brief introduction to our products and we'll take a closer look at our products which support exams. So we have the Exam ReaderPen and the ReaderPen. Then I will be handing over to Julia and then we'll look at some evidence and impact. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, we will have time to take some of your questions. So let's get going. So for those of you that don't know Scanning Pens, we've been established over 16 years. I've probably been with Scanning Pens about 4 years now. So I look after the British international schools and would normally be attending the conference sessions hosted by COVIS and BSME. But we're all working remote at the moment, so we're doing everything online. So we've also got offices in the UK. So myself and Julia are live from the UK now. We're both in different locations. So I'm in the north of England and Julia's based down in the Midlands. But we also have offices in the States, Australia, Canada, and India. So if any of you are from any of those countries, we can put you in touch with those offices direct. We supply assistive tech in the form of a ReaderPen, which basically converts text to speech. And we supply thousands and thousands of students from primary age right through to further education, higher education. And we've also started to roll out into the commercial world and prison education as well. We've got a huge company ethos on improving literacy journey for all of those with reading difficulties. And I don't know if any of you have ever attended the BET educational show, but that's a picture of some of our UK team. And in the centre of that picture, we have our two founders. We have Toby Sutton and Jack Churchill. Jack Churchill's actually holding the award that we got at BET in 2020 for Company of the Year. But not long after that, how our lives did change. And last week, I don't know if you've seen it across social media, we were proud winners of the Queen's Award for Enterprise and International Trade. So we're so excited to receive that. So if we take a look at our products, we have the ReaderPen, which I like to call our day-to-day ReaderPen. So some of you may already be using that, and I'll go into details of how that works in a few minutes. We also have a solution called Connect, which we launched last year. This allows anybody who needs to capture a large piece of content and text, they download a mobile app onto the phone, and then it allows them to Bluetooth it onto multiple devices. And it also uses Google Translate, so they can translate. I think there's probably about 45 languages supported on Google Translate. The other solution is the Lingo Pen. So this, as it suggests, is a language translator pen and supports up to about 8 languages, supporting Spanish, French, German, Italian, and we've even got Arabic on there now, as well as Mandarin Chinese for a great tool for anybody that's learning English or one of those languages, as it will convert either way. We also launched the ReaderPen Secure. So basically, this is a stripped down version of the white ReaderPen, which we're supplying into prisons and the commercial workspaces. There's no storage on there as well. And then the brightly coloured orange one, which I've got here with me now, is our JCQ exam approved pen. So the white ReaderPen and the exam ReaderPen are the ones that are predominantly used in schools, colleges and universities throughout the world. So why are scanning pens helpful, you may think? Well, it's a mid-text solution. I think they're quite a nice discreet design. The exam reader is obviously a bright coloured orange one, but I think if anyone was using this, a child, a pupil, a student of any age, they're sat in the library, you wouldn't wonder what on earth they were doing. It's very discreet and it allows them to scan over printed text and it will read the words aloud. The other useful thing to mention is it doesn't require any Wi-Fi. I think this is absolutely great. So as long as it's charged up, it does come with a rechargeable battery. So I would say use it like you would a mobile phone, charge it up overnight, and then you get 8 hours life on it the next day. So as long as it's charged up, no Wi-Fi required. It can be used anytime, anywhere. So students don't even need to be on campus. They could be studying remote. They could be at home. As long as it's charged up, and then if there's any words that they come across that they don't understand whilst they're not in school, college or university, then they can get the pen out and use it. So just go over that. They're battery operated, they're totally portable. They're designed to read individual words. They're also capable of reading lines of text and indeed paragraphs of text now. And they will support those with dyslexia. They may have low reading levels as well, or they may have other specific learning difficulties. Perhaps they might be partially sighted, or perhaps they're learning English as a second language or learning English. So if we take a look at the white ReaderPen, this is very feature rich. It converts text to speech. It also includes dictionaries because this pen also supports French and Spanish. But I must point out, it doesn't translate. So it will read French, it will read Spanish, it will read English. So the dictionaries it includes is not only the Collins English Dictionary and the monolingual dictionaries, you've also got the Oxford Primary Dictionary on there, or OPD as that's sometimes referred to. So again, depending on the age of pupils that are using the pen, the Oxford Primary Dictionary might be the more appropriate one, as it will give them a very simple definition. The other useful tool we have on this pen is Scan to File. I think this is great for anybody that doesn't want to take notes. At speed, they can quickly scan a document, a book, save it onto the pen, and then if they connect it up perhaps to your virtual learning unit, they can save it into a Word doc or a Google Doc application, and then they can share that with their peers. It also comes with a recorder as well. A lot of students will use this that I've spoken to actually record a lecture. Some use it to practice pronunciation as well. So it might be a word they don't understand. They scan it over the word and then they can record themselves repeating that word. All our pens come complete with settings. So this allows you to adjust it from left to right-handed. You can adjust the speed at which it reads back. You can adjust the volume, and it also comes complete with punctuation pause. So all our pens can be set to the personal preferences of the individual user that's using the unit. And as I say, this pen comes with 8 GB of storage. So anything that they scan, if they like, they can save it onto the pen, and then indeed they can scan to file as well. And as I say, if it's a word they don't understand, they can very quickly go into the dictionary and look at the meaning for it. Okay. So the other pen which is predominantly used in education is the exam approved pen. This has been approved by JCQ. So any of your schools that are following the British curriculum, this is a non-access arrangement. It just needs to be the student's normal way of working. So even though exams have been cancelled this year, students are still taking assessments. So you've got the option to use this pen in the assessments over the coming months. It's also been approved by Cambridge International Exams and IB, but there are access arrangements with those exam boards, which we can chat to you about later, or indeed I can send you some further information on those. So it was quite encouraging from JCQ at the beginning of this academic year that they're actually encouraging SENCOs to consider the use of technology now to a much greater extent, instead of using readers and scribes. And I think it'd be quite interesting to learn from you how you've actually managed during lockdown and students studying at home, and what strategies you've perhaps had to put in place to support those with specific learning difficulties such as dyslexia and reading. And this is a kind of technology perhaps that you could introduce to support them, despite them perhaps not even being on campus. The other thing about this exam ReaderPen, for those of you that have got students studying the IGCSE, it can also be taken into the English reading exam, whereas a human reader is not actually allowed in that particular exam. So the main features of the exam reader, you'll see in comparison to the ReaderPen, it is a stripped down version. All this pen will do is actually convert text to speech. It does have languages on it, it's got multiple languages on it, and it's got settings so you can adjust it again to the student's own personal preferences. So some of the languages that you might be interested in, it supports Danish, Dutch, Norwegian, Portuguese, Russian, Swedish, and we've also got Mandarin Chinese on there now. As well as English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish. One of the new features to the pens last year was actually allowing users to adjust the accent. So not only does it have English, but they can also select Irish, Scottish, and Indian. And all our pens come with a wizard setup, so they're relatively easy to start up once you actually receive them. But we do have supporting training material that we can provide you with if you're interested in perhaps taking a trial or investing in the technology. So when it comes down to exams, I think for anybody taking an exam, it's a very anxious time for them. But even more so for the student that struggles to read or has dyslexia. You may still already be using human readers, but have human readers been able to support students during this pandemic? When it comes around to normal exams, you'll be running assessments as well. You may have to provide separate rooms for those that are requiring human readers. Whereas this kind of technology was part of an overall support package, then you could make it totally inclusive and allow students to sit in the exam hall with everybody else. And, you know, human readers, most common solution, it can be very expensive. And again, I think this year has taught us that all the strategies that are in place have supported the students with specific learning difficulties over the last 12 months. So we've really seen growth in people wanting access to this kind of technology. So Julia, it's time for you now to discuss how to support students through the assessment. So over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Geraldine. Yes, so I'm going to be talking about particularly our learners who have those literacy difficulties that make it really challenging for them to perform well in that examination. So I'm talking about dyslexia. My experience, well, okay, I've been through teaching for about 25 years, as Geraldine mentioned. Also took some qualifications in dyslexia, so I've spent a lot of my career working with dyslexic learners. And in PRUs too, where students have been excluded actually, and sometimes it was because of undiagnosed learning needs that just weren't supported adequately, that led to a lot of anxiety, frustration, and behaviour difficulties. So I've seen quite a lot of the pathway for dyslexic learners, what happens when students do get support and what happens when students don't get support. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you pop them in the chat box as we go along. So hopefully you'll think of me as someone who might be able to support you with any questions you might have. Okay, so let's just think about these 4 things that you can do to ensure that your learners will be successful. And I think we can split it up really simply into thinking about that learner's well-being, knowing them as an individual, ensuring that the preparation is really good, making sure that we provided the right revision package, and then the exam technique. We know that when they're in that examination, they've got the right tools, they've practiced how they're going to be performing in that exam, how they're going to be answering questions, and so they feel that they've got that content, that knowledge, and the tools to support them. It all is about stickability. We want the stuff that we are teaching to stick, so that when they are at that point of pressure, they can use it. Okay. So students with dyslexia, we know that they underperform. They do underperform, and it's just because of the way that tests are created. Okay, they're generally a measure of your ability to decode a question. That's a literacy skill. And so for some of our learners, what we're doing is asking them to do something really tricky, decode a question, and then we give them a grade based on that. And that seems terrifically unfair, because if they can't decode that question, all you are doing is testing their measure of literacy, not how imaginative, how creative, how intelligent, articulate, or insightful they are about a topic or their subject knowledge. And we've got to find a way to overcome that. And we want to bring the strengths of the dyslexic learner into the learning cycle. And we want to bring goals for revision into the learning cycle that's going to support active learning that needs to happen. Because dyslexic learners really need multisensory and multimodal supporting techniques. Okay. We've got to ensure for them that they've got the technology solutions available. And why? Well, it'll improve their confidence and it'll improve their self-esteem. And these are the things that are going to facilitate their exam success. So let's have a little bit of a think about the way that dyslexic learners perceive themselves. So not always positive. Okay, it can be really tricky being the dyslexic learner in the group. If you've got a class of 30, you've probably got about 3 dyslexic learners in that group, somewhere on the dyslexia continuum. That can be from moderate, mild to quite severe. They are going to be in your class. They may not have made themselves obvious to you because they're very good at flying underneath the radar, but there are some similar feelings and some similar difficulties that are encountered by most dyslexic learners. And these are the things that are said by adults as well as by younger learners. They have a very similar kind of experience, and these are an experience of anxiety in school. This is an emotional aspect of dyslexia, and according to the research, the majority of dyslexic preschoolers, they're happy and they're well adjusted, but the problems develop when early reading instruction doesn't match their learning style. And so anxiety starts quite young. If you think that you're going to have the tools for reading round about age 7, I think this is the point when anxiety starts to build, because you realize that you are not learning in the same way as your peers. So anxiety is the most frequent emotional symptom reported by dyslexic learners, and dyslexics become fearful because of their constant frustration and confusion in school. Now, anxiety causes human beings to avoid whatever frightens them, and however, the dyslexic learner is no exception. This is what happens when we're feeling that anxiety. But it can be misinterpreted by parents and teachers as hesitancy or laziness or unwillingness to participate. And actually that what you're seeing can be more related to anxiety and confusion rather than apathy. So the frustration that children with dyslexia have often centres on their inability to meet our learning expectations. And they're feeling like they're making careless and stupid mistakes. It can make you feel chronically inadequate over your school career. And this is, really frustrating for those learners. The inconsistency that you experience as a dyslexic learner is another thing that I'd like you to become aware of, because some dyslexic learners perform fantastic on one day and they can perform terribly on another day, and there seems to be no rhyme or reason to why they perform the way they do. If you have a student with low vision, you would expect to be supporting them with their low vision every day that they came to school. You would know what tools and support you would need to put in place. You wouldn't expect them to miraculously have 20/20 vision the next day. You know that that's their learning difference. But it's difficult with dyslexia. It can be masked with this inconsistency. And the thing about inconsistency is when you keep shooting at the target and you keep failing to hit it, teachers often will say, that wasn't right. You got that wrong. This was the incorrect focus. You didn't bring your attention to this or to that. And this negative feedback cycle is really exhausting. When you actually teach people archery, you never say, you didn't hit the target. That went into the weeds. That was too far away. That's not how you would teach someone to hit a target. You would say, your aiming can be improved if you just move your body slightly. If you make sure that your grip and your wrist are positioned this way as you pull back, that will give you greater focus and body control. So when you're taught archery, you are given those little nuggets of information that will help you hit that target. You are never told 2 out of 10, you're wide of the mark. You are always given that supportive information. And I'd really encourage you to think analytically about how you provide feedback to people who produce inconsistent results. So we've got that dyslexia performance varying from day to day. And all of these things can result in feelings of depression, that you're just not up to the task, you're not adequate, you're not as good as your peers, and that erodes away at you. And it can result in this sort of distorted self-image, which I've indicated here with the mirrors that you see in the circus, or if you go to the fun fair, that just distort you. You look in the mirror and you see someone who's, you know, short, fat, tall, weird, but not quite you. And that's the lens very often that dyslexic learners see through when they think about themselves. So according to Erik Erikson, during the first years of school, every child must resolve the conflict between positive self-image and feelings of inferiority. And if children succeed in school, they develop positive feelings about themselves and believe they can succeed in life. But if children meet failure and frustration, they learn that they're inferior to others, and it makes their efforts make very little difference. And instead of feeling powerful and productive, they learn that their environment controls them and they feel powerless and incompetent. All of this stuff is going to lead to depression, and we've got to think carefully about our well-being of our dyslexic learners and taking time to get to know what our learners' strengths are, what they can do positively, to encourage and ensure that we provide that targeted support that is about adjusting what they do is crucial to how they're going to be performing in their examinations and indeed their levels of success in life. We've got to get our messaging right for these learners. So preparation, this is the next thing that we need to do. We know our learners, we've got to capitalize on the things that they are good at, which is usually all the creative big picture thinking, ability to map ideas, to visualize ideas, to connect with people, share those ideas. Let's draw on those strengths and really know our learners, and that way we can sort out the accessibility needs that they have. So repetition is essential. If you know about Ebbinghausen's forgetting curve, it's this sort of dreadful curve where what you learn tails off really quickly if you don't revisit it. I think explicitly explaining to our learners that you are going to forget unless you revisit. Otherwise, they don't see the purpose of revisiting. So we've got to build repetition into the revision that we provide. And this doesn't happen just before the exams. It has got to be planned into your curriculum so that you are constantly revisiting that learning. Make the plans that are going to support the individual learning preferences. That means if you've got the book that's got to be learned, Also provide the audio book. If possible, have a look at the play or the film. You know, provide all of the resources in as many different ways as you can. Provide opportunities to act it out, making sure that that learner is embedding those learnings in different strands that will make that learning sticky for them. You need to talk to them about the support package, and hopefully the support package has been in place for a while, so they know that they're going to be using access arrangements. They know they're going to be using particular tools like dictation or mapping software, or using a ReaderPen on their journey to develop their knowledge. They know the accessibility features of the tools that they have got. They've got to be taught explicitly. Students do not pick them up without support. It's got to be explicitly supported for those learners. I don't think we use exam peer mentors enough in schools. I think we could do that more. If you've got a learner in sixth form or an older learner who can come back and support the learning of other learners by saying, hey, you know, I recognize that when I got to the exam I wasn't familiar with, or I needed to have done this. Hearing that from your peer is really helpful. And if you have someone who is some student with dyslexia or any learning difference really, who can come back and share that lived experience, I think it's very, very powerful for the student who is just about to encounter their examinations. I'm going to give a quick shout out now, while we're talking about making the most of your memory and repeating, to Ochre Books, because they have a free revision guide that's really good. And Google it, download it, and it goes through and shows just how you can make the most of your memory. Ochre I quite like because the person who actually created Ochre Books had a dyslexic daughter, so they are revision guides that are designed to support dyslexic learners. And because of that, they're very visual. They've got short and snappy descriptions. When I think about the study guides actually that I've given my son to look at, they are really heavy documents, and that is just too much to try and read and absorb. Even with a ReaderPen, assimilating and remembering, getting that learning sticky is tricky. So you've got to find good resources that are visual and engaging, so students creating bullet points from their learning. So if you've not looked at Ochre Books, I'll just give them a shout out. I think they're very worthy of a look, because they present it's not a tome, it's a manageable amount of revision presented in a visual way. And also they'd have a 3-step method going on, which is read, engage, and learn. And I think the important thing here is that we provide our learners with the opportunity to exercise the out muscle when they are revising. So if you say you've got to revise, I don't know, chapters 4, 5, and 6, what students do is they go away with their big heavy revision book and they read chapters 4, 5, and 6, and they try and remember it. And maybe they copy a bit out, and maybe they highlight a bit. Now that is not effective revision. It's certainly not effective revision for a dyslexic learner in any way, shape or form, because all you're doing is exercising the in muscle. And when you're in the exam, that's not the muscle you need. It's not a real muscle, but it's a good description. The muscle that you need is the out muscle. That's the one that produces the information. That's the one that synthesizes, sorts, extrapolates, develops concepts from the knowledge. And so just reading as revision strategy is not going to support. So if you take a multimodal approach, you're going to make this job much easier for your learners. So let's talk about this technique that you can apply. So this first one, knowledge construction, this is thinking about what you've got to produce in the exam, creating memory hooks, making it fun, making it lively, making it relatable to you. So taking combinations of things so that you can make a trigger. So I'll give you an example of me trying to remember a shopping list. If I had to remember eggs, I'd balance them on my head. If I had to remember a loaf of bread, I'd perhaps hollow out the bread and then put it over the top of the eggs and wear it as a hat. And then maybe I'd have some melted cheese on the top of the bread coming down. And I've got a fairly good chance to remembering those 3 things on my shopping list now, because I've made it fun, I've made it sticky, I've made it visual, I've created a story. I've used the output because I've told you. So using these different techniques, visualizing, thinking of the sound of things, sausages frying, I've got a better chance of remembering if I then stick them into my bread like horns that I also needed sausages on my list. You've got to pull the whole sensory experience in for our dyslexic learners. The next bit, which is represented by the word engagement here, is where you pair. Essentially, you're pairing up knowledge. So be accountable. This is about agency, okay? I've learned something. Now I'm going to share it with you. I am going to teach you what I know. And there are lots of ways that you can do that in your revision. You can show and tell. You could actually actively stage your learning almost as though it's a performance. If you think of a theatre production, it's a really sensory experience. You take everything to that stage, the lighting, the vibe of it, the colour, the costume. So in a way, if we can bring that kind of technique into revision so that you perform the outcome, it becomes sticky. And then the final bit I would say is to do with sharing. Share the learning, have study groups, create the context so that you in turn share different ways that you've learned something. And if you do that, you've now got multiple ways to learn the same thing, and you're creating many more learning hooks, and you associate perhaps a person with a particular learning point. So you might be just remembering a guy in your class who did a really great presentation on whatever it was, and that might have been enough to make that information sticky and memorable for you. So stickability is what we're talking about when we are doing our exam revision. And if you come away with one thought from my presentation here, it is, how do we create stickability? Well, you've got to access it, and then you've got to find a way to make a hook. ReaderPens are really great on a day-to-day basis to do that. And we know that we get improved engagement with SEN learners when we do that. I'm just going to bring up this little slide here, and it's got Bloom's taxonomy, which is the kind of basic stuff, the remembering at the bottom, all the way going up through understanding, applying, analysing, evaluating and creating at the top. If you can get to the analysing, evaluating and creative stage of your revision, you are really synthesising that information and are ready to share it. How can we do this with the scanning pen? I thought it might just be interesting to draw those things across. So scanning pens help you if you scan, you listen, you remember, you understand. Multimodal. It creates a bridge, so the scanning pen can be plugged in to your computer so that you can lift information, you could drop it into a mind map, you could drop it onto a picture, you could drop it into a Word document. Once you are starting to transfer information from one place to another place, you're making it sticky. So the digital bridge that a ReaderPen provides is really excellent for that. We're always thinking about how we make this stuff accessible. As soon as it becomes accessible, you create stickability. So the ReaderPen, it does these jobs. It reads, it decodes, it transfers, it records, as Geraldine mentioned earlier. When we're looking at exam technique, I would really have hoped that maybe your learners might have had the chance to have used a ReaderPen in their learning journey, perhaps at the earliest phase of their learning, because the sooner you embed accessibility tools, the better. You're not going to be eroding that self-confidence. You're going to be building that self-confidence. You're going to be giving those tools those learners need. It might be a ReaderPen. It might be another accessibility tool. But just important that you embed this within learning as early as you potentially can. You make it that normal way of working. So by the time you get to exam, an exam technique, you have practiced. And on exam technique, you have got to do that business of modeling the answers to the questions, which means accessing the questions, which is where a ReaderPen can be incredibly helpful if you struggle with that business of decoding. So I just wanted to present a little bit of research because I think it's quite exciting that we've now got 3 studies that are telling us the same thing. That's always exciting for me. So we've got Garner, Mortimer and Coleman, who've each independently corroborated the impact of scanning pens, and in these particular studies, the exam pen. So 83% of students who used the exam pen achieved a real increase in their final results. That's corroborating evidence from 3 researchers, which is great. In the studies by both Garner and Coleman, the students' grades were collated for mock examination prior to being given access to learning and preparation time with an exam reader. In both of those studies, significant improvements to their final grades were achieved. So Garner records the highest individual increase of 75% improvement to the student's final test grade, with an average increase of 47.6%. So that's for one of those learners, massive increase, just because they could read the question. This is where we tail right back to the start of my presentation, where I said you've got to be able to access the question to do your best. Otherwise, that exam test is only a measure of how well you can read an exam paper. It's just a measure of your decoding and literacy. If you've got the right tool to do that, many students fly. So I was really delighted to read that bit of research. We've got a student who has absolutely, that's nearly 50% improvement because of using the exam reader. Coleman records 9% of the intervention group who used an exam reader achieving 5 grades of progress between the mock examination and the final examination. And Coleman's study records significant improvement results, with 70% of those learners achieving 3 grades of progress or more. So we're talking about the students who, for these studies, were dyslexic, who struggled to access, who then made that significant improvement. And you're welcome to look at these pieces of research that you will be able to find on the Scanning Pens website if you're interested into looking at these study pieces a little bit further. So the significance for this support for students taking perhaps a GCSE English paper is that in JCQ examinations, a human reader is not permitted because of the advantages given through intonation and meaning that a human reader tends to put into their voice. I know, I've done it. It's really difficult not to do that. So a pen will not give clues to a word. A computer reader or a reader pen is permitted in that examination, and it means that students who would have previously not been granted a human reader can show their actual knowledge for reading and comprehension because they've been given fair accessibility. In the study by Mortimer, using the new group reading test as a measure of progress, students who were given the opportunity to use the pen between pre-test and post-test measurements made significant gains to their total standardized scores for vocabulary and comprehension. And so this is telling us that we know that where vocabulary and comprehension is a difficulty, exam pen is a really great solution in that exam technique to have. So I'm not going to labour the research any further because I think you could probably have a look yourself if you would like to. They make very, very interesting studies, very interesting. I'll just go on and Geraldine mention really briefly, because I'm just thinking about the well-being of our learners who've been able to use a ReaderPen, and I just want to get some feedback from those students. This came out of a study of Malta called Readers for Life, and in this study it was about the self-concept. We're back to that well-being that's so important, and what those students said who used that ReaderPen, and they were dyslexic, learning difficulty, categorized students who really struggled, low socioeconomic background, who made great progress with the ReaderPen. They said The pen's a good tool. It helped me cope with my reading problem. The pen helped me to become independent, and now I choose to use the pen rather than a reader. I think differently about books and reading. I used to avoid books, but now I have courage. I think that's a real heartwarming statement. And the last thing I'll say is I started to scan and read lots more things. I even used the pen to read the contents on a can of food to find out what I was eating. So I'm going to just bring this all to a conclusion now to say those key things that you need to think about for your learners who have learning differences are that student's well-being, their ability to prepare, and your ability to give them the techniques they need within that preparation. In the revision that you go over, you revise, you make learning sticky, and you ensure that accessibility tools are embedded in the learning process. And finally, that exam technique has been practiced. And if you can do those things, you will create stickability for those dyslexic learners that you are so keen to support. I think that's me, Geraldine.
Yes, thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And we are talking about time. We're definitely running on time. So we've plenty of time to take some questions. But I think there's some great tips, advice, your knowledge, you know, looking at the feedback from the studies we've done. It's all good. And I'm hoping you guys can take away some of these techniques, and Julia's available for questions now. So if any of you have any questions at all, put them in the chat room. Just coming to the end of this presentation now, just to see whether you've got any questions, but I've just included some of our international schools feedback. So this one's from New Cairo, British International School. Again, it's talking about the exam reader. It has made a very positive impact on the students' confidence and their independence, and it has helped with exam access arrangements. And they're making a big push on recommending the pen to parents of Key Stage 4 learners who have human readers as exam access arrangements. And that particular school has continued to invest in the pens. And then there's just one here from King's School, Al-Barsha. The reader automatically boosted our children's confidence. It's all about boosting their confidence, their independence, allowing them to read on their own without having to put their hand up in class, or indeed, if they're studying remotely, they can just get the pen out and scan it. So first question in from Sharon, may headphones be attached for use in class? Yes, the answer to that, Sharon, is yes. I don't know if you can see here, but there's a universal adapter at the base of all our pens, and I've normally got some headphones on my desk, but they do come complete with a set of earphones. You can buy multiple earphones. A lot of students prefer to use their own headsets as well, so you will find them doing that in class. But yes, earphones do complete, and the pens come complete in a box like that with charger, earphones, and indeed a protective case. And I don't know if you can see, I always have a pen on me, and I use a lanyard, which is a great way for students that are maybe on practical courses as well. They can just have it on them at all times and just get it out as and when they need it. And I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but this is great as well because it comes with a little plastic protector case as well. Thanks, Julia. So any more questions at all? As I said earlier, you will get the recording of this session. I'll send you through the presentation as well. If any of you think of any questions post-event, then please send them our way and I can share them with Julia, and Julia will happily share her knowledge with you and give some advice.
Just while I'm thinking about that lanyard that you're wearing, it has got this sort of rubber shoe that the pen goes into that protects it. And I advise teachers to wear the pen around their neck so that you become the model. And if you are part of the process of showing and using and making this part of everyday use, you break down barriers that way. And students who might have had a problem might be able to go to you and say, can you just help me switch from, I don't know, right-handed to left-handed mode? and that way you can solve the problems as you go along. It's great to have someone on your staff team who's an expert. I'd really encourage that, and who wears the pen and uses the pen. I think with any accessibility tool, you need to demonstrate it, model it, and be pro use of it in order for it to really embed effectively in your school.
Yeah, definitely. And just making it available to the kids as well, isn't it? Just allowing them to have access to it anytime, anywhere. Another question.
So hello from SEK. Oh, I can't see this. Catalonia. Experience of the pen. My first question springing to mind would be, how dependent could students grow on it? And I think my answer to that would be, actually, students start and dependency. Okay. They start, they might be dependent on that initially, but they develop skills as they use it. And what we know from our studies is that then students, because of the simultaneous highlighting, so in other words, as the pen says the word, it's highlighted in a block of colour. And what happens is that you start to embed an association between the sound, the shape, the grapheme, the phoneme, the sound, the look of the word, and then some children actually move on and then don't need to use the pen. They grow out of that phase. So if you are thinking this is cheating, I would strongly suggest it's not cheating, it's accessibility that's really crucial for a learner at a specific point in time. And actually, does that matter? If the important thing is that you decode, you learn, and then you can show your knowledge and understanding, I think that's the really crucial bit. And then you've got a lifetime actually to develop strategies for learning technique, and you will gravitate to the tools that you need at the point where you need them. In school, I think ReaderPen, ExamPen, really crucial. As you're then going into college, maybe you need a different set of tools. Maybe you need more accessibility features to help you to do the work that you're going to do. But if you are dyslexic, you are probably going to need some kind of accessibility support for life, because you are dyslexic for life. You don't grow out of it. It's just there. You develop better coping strategies and you develop techniques to support you as you go along. I hope that's a helpful answer.
Yeah, so another question coming in from Peter. Morning from Runnymede in Madrid. When requesting access arrangements for exams, do we have to specifically ask for the exam reader pen?
Okay, so if you have a JCQ examination, you do not need to fill in a Form 8. You do not need to do any of that paperwork because it is a centre delegated access arrangement. You need to tell the person who is involved in access arrangements in your school that this has been a normal way of working. Your student has been using this for a period of time. Perhaps they did their mock exam with it. And then that's just recorded, and that student can have that exam pen in the examination. Would you add anything to that, Geraldine?
Yeah, and a lot of institutions as well will just go down the exam reader route. So this is a pen that does become their normal way of working. However, as Julia mentioned, there's many advantages of introducing this white reader pen because of all the features and early intervention for younger years. This also might be something they use and as a normal way of working, but it has to be this exam approved pen without the dictionary, without the storage on it, without the recorder. This is a pen that will be used in exams. I'm not sure, Julia, actually, what the arrangements are for assessments this year, because there is an exam lock on this. So I'm wondering whether we could take this into an assessment over the coming assessments. You're nodding, so.
I am. Yes, you could. And so the white reader pen has got in the settings an ability to lock it. So you put in a 3-digit by just using the center button. So you select numbers, 6 numbers. Only you know that number. The student's not going to guess it. And by putting in those 6 numbers, it changes that pen from being the functionality of the reader pen to the functionality of the exam pen. So no dictionary, essentially like using that exam pen. And in the assessments, you can do that. So if you've got a reader pen that you've set up for that learner, so you've changed it so it's right-handed or left-handed, or you've changed it to a punctuation pause, or you've got a speed of playback, and you were doing a piece of learning with that student, and then you wanted them to go on and do an assessment with it, you could just pop in that number. All of the features that they've chosen for their pen stays exactly the same, and then they just go on and use that pen just like you would in an exam. And you've created this opportunity to be able to allow them to seamlessly be supported with that accessibility tool, from learning to assessment. Really straightforward. We are in the Wild West, it has to be said. This is an exceptional year. But I also think that's a great technique if you are testing your students in class, or you're doing some revision activity, you're not in exam conditions, you haven't spoken to the exams officer, you haven't got the case of exam pens for them to practice with, but they can practice with their ReaderPen as part of that revision.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. So for those of you that may not have tried the pens, we do offer free trials. I know we're coming to the end of this academic year. I will be following up this presentation. I'd also like to add, and Julia might want to just discuss that, but Julia also offers CPD sessions as well. She runs 3 different sessions on introduction to the technology. She talks about implementation as part of a second CPD training session, and then she's got a 3rd session as well, which is looking at specific learning difficulties and learning support. So again, if any of you are interested in taking one of these sessions, then do get in contact with us. We still have some time for some questions, so do send them our way. Otherwise, thank you everybody for joining us today. Julia?
I'll just say about the CPD.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to train groups of teachers. So if you've got a case of pens and you want some strategy for your teaching team, or you want specific help for the people who are going to be delivering that intervention, I'm quite happy to train a large group of staff. Happy to do that, because that might be the most effective way for me to deliver that CPD for you. If you, I think, really are thinking about ways to embed the use of scanning pens throughout your school, or you're thinking, okay, this is a bit of a long-term project for us, we're going to really make something of this, where year on year we perhaps buy a few more pens, or we develop the strategy a bit more, I think then it becomes very worthwhile doing some CPD support with me.
Yeah, definitely. I know they're very well received, especially for the training around how to use the pens that Julia offers. So yeah, do take advantage of that if that's something that interests you, definitely. So yeah, I think we've come to a close, Julia, by the looks of it. So thank you very much for joining us. We will send you a copy, you'll get the recording. And if any questions come to mind after this session, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. We've got so much information that we could potentially share with you as well. We're limited to time on these webinars, and we know you're very busy people teaching anyway. I've put some links on here so you can go specifically to look at Exam Reader, ReaderPen. You can specify whether you're primary, secondary, further education or higher education, with some fantastic case studies from institutions as well, by sector as well, which you might be interested in taking a look at. And do take a look on our YouTube channel. We've so many video playlists. There's ones we've created ourselves, and then with some great ones from external consultants as well, which are great. But again, you need some time to watch all these things, and I know you're so busy teaching at the moment. But that's it, everybody. Thanks again. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and we'll be in contact with you very soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.